In the second part of the video, we're going to look and see how we can set up Sonic Pi code so that it can be controlled by means of this start bar selector GUI. And to do that, we're going to look at a different piece. I'm just going to come over here and to change the music from the Beata Sphere piece we've been looking at to Frere Jacques. Now, this may be familiar to some of you because it's a piece I often use when illustrating things on Sonic Pi because it's very easy to code it in. But we're doing it in a slightly different way here and with a slightly different twist. Those of you who read music will notice the part starting off here for Frere Jacques, da 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 da. But you'll also notice that we haven't got just one but four different parts, and they're all going to come in one after the other. The second part starts at this point, the third part at this point, and the fourth part at that point. It's what's known as a round, and I'm sure you all perhaps sung those before, perhaps with a group of other people. So how do we actually do that in Sonic Pi, and how can we arrange it so that we can actually start playing at any one of these particular bars? Well, I'm just going to get rid of the start bar selector for the moment and switch to buffer 0, where we've got one tune for Sonic Pi put into Sonic Pi here, and it's arranged slightly perhaps oddly compared with usual, because that is the added twist that we're going to do is that every 2 bars we're going to change the tempo. It's going to get faster. So we start off at a fairly sedate place of 100 crotchets per minute, but after the first line of the tune, da 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 da, we increase the tempo to 120 beats per minute, and after the next 2 to 140, and so on, until by the time we get up to the fourth part to a conclusion, it's 220 beats per minute. Then we're going to start playing the first part again at this new fast tempo, but this time we're going to decrease the tempo every 2 bars until when we get to the end of the piece and we're finishing off the fourth part with its last 2 bars, it's back down to 100 beats per minute, you can see there. And it gives us a total of 28 bars for the entire piece. So what we're doing here is just looking at one part to see how this is built up in Sonic Pi. And you can see that we are going to store the notes, which I'm using the nomenclature format for these rather than MIDI numbers. So C4 stands for the C in octave 4, which is here, and then D, then E, then C, back to C again, C, D, E, C. So that repeats those 2 bars. Then the next line is going to give us the next 2 bars, E, F, G, the G being a minim, and then E, F, G again. And then the faster notes, the 4 crotchets, 4 quavers that we get there, G, A, G, F, and then 2 crotchets again, E, C, G, A, G, F, E, C, and then finally the last 2 bars, which is C, dropping down to the G in octave 3, back to C again, and doing that twice. And I split it into 2 bar segments so that we can actually alter the tempo or the speed of the music in between one and the next. Corresponding to this array A1 for the first part, which is initially empty and then has 13 different values put in it, A0 up to A12 down at the bottom here. These are then all stored in this array, and each one of them covers 2 bars of the piece. When we finish playing the tune in the first part, you'll notice that there are some bars of rest. And these again are in 2 bar stints because after that the tempo is going to change again. So we've got the symbol for a rest, which is :R times 8. So there'll be 8 R's with commas between them in that list. It's just a quicker way of writing it rather than writing them out continuously there. And that's those 2 bars. And then the next 2 bars, which are those 2 there, will be given by the 8 rests there. And then finally, those 2 there, H rests, And at this stage, this one is slightly different than the remaining ones because we are going to continue on at the same speed. We don't have 2 bars, we have 4 bars at the speed of 220 here. And therefore we start playing the tune again from the beginning. And rather than write it out again, which I could do there, I've simply said that this little bit that we're adding on the end there is exactly the same as the section we had up here for A10. So we simply add A10 on the end. And equally, the next section of 2 bars is the same as A1, the second line of music, and so on. And that continues until we've finished off the piece. The only difference being that we don't say A12 is equal to A6 because we only want the first 8 bars there. So we actually write that one out explicitly there. We don't add A1 on again, A10 on again, because otherwise we'd be playing for a third time. Now the second section of this down here, which is the B values, this B array is going to hold all the durations of the notes. And we let the basic note, the basic note, the crotchet, have a duration of 1. So the first part of the tune, just looking back at the notes here, is 4 crotchets for the first bar, 4 crotchets for the second, all at a speed of 100. And so we simply have 8 ones for that. The next bar is crotchet, crotchet, minim, which is going to be 1, 1, 2, a minimum being twice the length of a crotchet, and that's repeated. Then we get the faster 4 notes, which are quavers, half the length of a crotchet, so there's 4 of those halves, followed by 2 ones for the 2 crotchets, and that repeats again. And then the final section of the tune, which is crotchet, crotchet, minim again, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2. So that point there corresponds to the beginning of the bar where the tempo changes up to 180. And here we have our 2 bars of rest, and instead of saying rest times 8, we say 1 times 8. That will give us 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1 when that's expanded out again. Same thing for the next 2 bars, another 8 crotchets rest, and then as for the other part, we get the 8 crotchets rest and we start playing the tune again. So we simply say, well, instead of writing them out again, we'll simply say that that bit is equal to B10 here added on the end for the next section. And that continues on all the way until each section being repeated. So B1 is the same, B7 is the same as B1, B8 is the same as B12, B19 is the same as B13. B112 is not the same as B16 because as for the notes, we only want to take the first section of this here. We don't want to start doing B10 again. So that's the whole thing. Then we have a list down here, and looking at those numbers, that should ring a bell because you've just seen them. Those are the numbers for all the tempos here, which starts at 100 and increases up to 220, which is where we've got to here, and then starts to decrease again back down to 100 at the end of the piece. So these are the tempos for each 2-bar section, apart from the middle one, which is going to be twice as long, 4 bars. So let's now see how we play this. Well, we choose a synthesizer for it, and part 1 is going to start with the synthesizer beep. It's played in a thread, which is not strictly necessary if we're just playing one of them, but if we're playing 4 parts together, that's how Sonic Pi is capable of doing that, because what the thread does is to say, start doing this section in between in thread do and end, and move them on immediately to the next command in the script, if there is one. And in this case, it'll be a command to start playing the second part and the third part and the fourth part, which all start playing at the same time, although for the second, third and fourth part, they're playing rest, so that you don't actually hear anything until they start to come in. So the way we do the playing is that we have 2 for loops. This one here, for I in 0 to A1, length -1, and then a second one down here with J as the loop variable. The first one simply selects which section you're going to play. For I, it is going to go from 0 up to A1 length -1. A1 is this outer array at the top here, and it's got 13 elements in it. A10, A11, A12 up to A112. So the first time we get to here, I is going to have the value of 0, and the next line is going to choose the 0th entry in this list here. Remember, when you're looking at arrays or lists in Ruby, you start counting from 0. So that will be 100, sets the tempo 100, we can see up here. Then we go to the inner loop, the J loop, and that's going to take the entry for A1I. I has the value 0, so that's going to take the entry up here, A10, all those 8 notes there, and it's going to go around a loop playing them in turn. If we look at this rather fearsome looking thing that says A1 brackets I brackets brackets J brackets, I the first time we get here has value 0, J has the value 0, so that's going to play that first note C4 that we've got up here. And it's got a sustain value which just keeps it sounding for 9/10 of the duration of the note, and it fades away for the final 10th of the note. And then before we play the next note, we need to sleep for the length of the note, which is given by B1ij. B1 is the array that holds all the lists of note durations. And the first time we get there, I is going to have value 0, J is going to have the value 0, so it's going to pick this 1 here, and it's going to sleep for 1 crotchet's duration before it goes back and does the next note, and so on. And so the whole thing just goes on and on and on. When it's finished going around the J loop the first time, that's the end of A10. It's going to go back and it's going to change I to 1. It's going to change the tempo to C1 1, which is 120. It's then going to go around the J loop again, but this time it's going to be A1I. I's now got the value 1, so it's going to be the second line of notes, and so on all the way through, and this just sounds like this, as you might expect. Just one part. It's going to get faster now. Faster again. Faster again. Then there's a pause where we get these 6 bars of rest, but eventually it's going to come in again, starting off here, but it's going to be going much faster, 220. Slows down again, slows down again, and it's now going at 160, but the other parts are finishing off getting even slower as we get on towards the end. So that's how it works with just one part. And now we're in a position where we can move on to the next section, which is going to show how we can build this up to 4 parts and also add in some extra code which will let us play the piece under the control of the GUI. But before we do that, we'll have a rest from Sonic Pi, and we're going next to have a look at the GUI and how that's made and the code which lets it run.